the Anglo Saxon economy. So when we talk about the economy, what we're talking about are things to do with jobs, trade, and money. And the Anglo Saxon economy was very, very different to ours. A lot of it depended on where you lived. So if you lived in a village or in the countryside, which was like 9 in 10 people, then your job was based around agriculture. Everyone had to get involved. Everyone was involved in farming of some sort, such as growing crops like barley or wheat, tending to animals, trapping fish, and so on. Some people in villages would learn crafts like pottery or weaving cloth, but things wouldn't be bought and sold in the way that we would. They would be traded. It's what we call an exchange economy. A peasant might trade pottery for milk, for example, or fresh eggs for fabric. Very few people in the countryside had money, such as coins. But if you lived near towns, you could take your things to markets every so often, so country life wasn't always completely isolated. But basically, the countryside equals food and farming, exchanging items for other items, and so on. It was quite similar in towns and built-up areas, but there were some differences. A lot of trade was still done by exchange, but there was more stuff to exchange. Towns like Colchester or London had specialists, so people who would make things like leather, or might have access to silver. Places by the coast on the east may have access to trade with places like Norway and Denmark, and those on the south would trade with France. So things like spices, wine, glass, or even slaves would end up being traded in Anglo-Saxon towns, and local English things like wool or iron would be traded outwards. Now, what did make towns different, at least big towns like London, was that they had mints which made coins. Coins were one of the most impressive things about the Anglo-Saxons. Now, they were hardly the first to use them, but they had them organised and controlled in a really, really effective way. Only the king could order coins to be made, and they all had to have exactly the same weight, because they were made from silver, so that meant they all had the same value, so they're worth the same amount. Now, every few years, they would recall all the coins and make them again to keep the weight and the value the same. From time to time, people might melt the coins down and take a little bit of the silver off and try and pass it off as the same value, but really you're getting a little bit less silver in your coin. So every few years, they would recall them in and recast these coins to keep the value the same. This system shows just how well organised and effective the government was. Other kingdoms had all sorts of coins of different sizes and values, and it became quite confusing and hard to control. But here, they were well controlled and well managed. There are about 9 million silver pennies in use by 1066. You could buy a sheep with 5 of them, or a pig with 10. But mainly, they were used by the rich and the elite to show their status and to pay for things from abroad or to pay for military equipment. Most ordinary people continued exchanging things when they wanted to trade, and in towns there was a bit more to trade and a bit more variety and things from abroad compared to what you'd have in the countryside.